Saul and Battery, hosted by Mel and Kelly.
And Mike.
Forget what you know. Forget what you know. Saul and Battery.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Saul and Battery, where we recap the most recent episode of Better Call Saul. I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
And I am Mike at Official Pagan on just about everything.
And so we go. We're halfway through. This is episode 5 of a 10-show season. And we've not only at the halfway mark, but we have cut our 1-minute recap now to a 30-second recap, given Mike's excellence at recapping. So we've done that. So we're about to do that. So before I take my shot at the recap, top line reaction to tonight's episode, Mike?
It's strange because it went more or less the way I expected it to, but I was still anxious to see how they would play that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew what was going to happen at the end. But it was an interesting path to get there, and we got to see some old friends again. So we'll certainly talk about that. But I've stalled long enough. I would like to point out, though, when we have to do the 30-second recap, it's like super easy for Mike because he does not have to start the timer. But I do.
So is this advanced warning? You're not going to do what I did and cut 10 seconds off? You're not going to make it the 20-second recap?
I don't know. I doubt it. I think I'm going to need the full 30. But I still think since in the past I basically never came close to a minute. If I come close to 30, it's personal growth as far as I'm concerned. So let me adjust the timer a teeny bit. Looks pretty good. Well, actually, I made it worse there, didn't I? Okay. Here we go, guys.
Here it is, the moment of truth.
Okay, Jimmy helps clean up the electron-free Chuck bubble. Rebecca's visit is cut short by a flip phone freakout. Jimmy goes finger shopping at the vet. Kim is Mesa very awesome. Chuck rehearses not being such a douche and bumps into Huel. It's bring your ex-wife to court day, and Jimmy damages the assault charge with a well-placed battery. Boom.
Excellent stuff. Under 30 seconds. It was perfect. I loved all the jokes, especially bring your ex-wife to court day.
Yeah, I like the flip phone freakout. But it was a fun episode called Chicanery, and that's what we're going to be talking about now. So I have a hunch where your quote of the show is going to come in. We'll see. But we'll go and kind of step through a little bit of the episode in general. In the opening, we've got Chuck's environment being kind of cleaned up. So this is a bit of a flashback. There's a whole, do I keep my ring on or not? We eventually figure out that this is post-divorce, Rebecca coming to visit Chuck, and Chuck doesn't want to let her know that he's got this issue coming on, so he concocts a story until she gets a call, and that doesn't work out so well.
So there's a couple things with this. First, I'm glad we got to see her. I felt like she could easily have been one of those characters we just heard about referenced and we never got to meet. So I'm glad we got to meet her. We got a little bit of backstory about what she does. But personally, and this is something that will kind of play into the end of it as well, talking about their amicable split, I kind of want to know more about the split now. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and the cool thing is for the previews for the next episode, she's in it again. She's talking to Jimmy about you got what you want, which is a little bit of a spoiler that things may turn out okay for Jimmy. But yeah, I'd like to learn a little bit more about, because I had just assumed it was Chuck's kind of weird, weird electron issue that was the thing that drove her out, but apparently that came post divorce. So yeah, I would like to learn a little bit more about that. And so I think and I'm glad, I agree with you. I'm glad to see her back. Like the actress, I like how she's portraying her, and it's going to be interesting to kind of understand a little bit more what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm glad we're getting to see her. I felt like, especially because I felt like Jimmy had set up, it's no wonder she left you kind of thing. So now I feel like I need to know more about it, especially seeing that flashback sequence is post-divorce, and there doesn't seem to be, at least from her side, any sort of animosity towards him.
No, not at all. And Chuck indicated, and we'll get to the tail end of it, his testimony that it was an amicable breakup, and she does seem pretty cool. So we'll see on that.
Now, do you think if you were ever to get divorced, you would be planning like dinner dates with your ex-wife?
I think no. I mean, I haven't really scenario planned that a lot, but
no, of course not. This is a hypothetical. This is
hypothetically.
Yeah.
I don't think that'd be on the short list for me. How about you?
I don't know. I would like to think, and maybe this is naive on my part, that after whatever the initial situation is that caused the divorce calm down, that I'm so amazing, of course she would want to at least remain friends with me.
That's a very reasonable point of view.
But of course, that's just my take on it.
So we move on. So we'll explore further the whole Mike and Kelly post-divorce dating plans. not Mike and Kelly divorcing. Things are going well with us.
Yeah.
But
our union is strong.
Yes. And it's because we listen to each other. So so then we come back, and what has slowly become one of my favorite characters ever is the shifty vet. And we come back into Jimmy in typical Jimmy fashion. So when Mike had to visit the vet, because you gotta have a pet, visit the vet, he had the good form at least to secure a puppy for Kaylee, and that all made sense, and it was good there. So Jimmy needs to visit the vet, so he's sitting there with a goldfish in a bag, typical shortcut Jimmy. And he goes in to visit with the vet, who has a lot to say about Jimmy's treatment of the goldfish.
Yeah, I did really enjoy that, because it is so obvious that he just bought that goldfish on the way over, and the vet's even though he is a shifty vet, as you said, is still clearly concerned about the welfare of this goldfish.
He clearly cares about animals, and it's very displeased with Jimmy's. He needs a bubbler. He's got lots of issues to come up. I think that fish is left in the parking lot as Jimmy heads out. Well,
that is the one thing kind of in this episode that it was missing, is now I do want to know what he did with the goldfish after all of that.
So what would Jimmy McGill name his goldfish?
That's a good question. That should be something our listeners have to come up with, because mostly because I can't think of anything.
That's good. I think that's a reasonable homework assignment for any Saul and Battery listeners, is in the comment section on YouTube, is please provide us what you think Jimmy would name his goldfish. I think that'd be very, very cool. Mike and I might throw out some suggestions to get the ball rolling, but please do that if you can. And then, so the shifty vet goes, well, you're probably not just here for the goldfish, so what do you need? And they're talking through that.
Well, I think we're skipping something here, Kelly. There was talk of the goldfish's gender.
Yes, there was. Is this where your quote comes from, Mike?
It does, but is this your quote?
No, it is not.
So my quote in this scene, obviously, is when Jimmy says, "Oh, now I can see the lipstick on the goldfish."
frankly, I'm a little surprised that in the dialogue, that's the quote you pick. It's a good one.
What did you think I was going to choose, Kelly?
Well, there was an earlier swinging comment that I thought you might.
What was that? I can't remember. What was that? It's been a while since I watched the episode.
It was something about if there was a swinging appendage on the goldfish and that type of thing. But
how would an arm?
I don't believe it was an arm.
Goldfish. Of course, fish don't have arms. How would a fin indicate the gender of the goldfish, Kelly?
That's an excellent question. Maybe something else for our listeners to answer. So, that whole scene was magic. I just love this vet. He is so awesome.
Yeah, he's a cool character. I hope that we see more of him and that gets developed a little bit further.
Yeah, and it's been nice because he's been kind of present, just in little spots, which is incredibly awesome. So, I did like the lipstick quote too, and that ended up being number 2 for me. The appendage related one was number 3. So when number 1's coming up in a while, it's actually at the tail end here, but
okay,
no pun intended. But and then I like the whole dialogue because we don't know at this point in time, but this becomes an incredibly funny exchange when Jimmy's talking about needing somebody with kind of light fingers to do some things. And the main question the vet has is, does he need to fit into a confined space or a small space? And Jimmy's like, nope. And he goes, then I've got the guy for you, which we'll talk a little bit more about later.
It's funny because just to give a little halfway spoiler to people, as soon as he said that, this is what I hoped was going to happen.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection until later, and then it was like, oh, it's perfect. So
it's weird for me because that was the first thing that popped in my head, like, oh, I hope that's what it is, but I didn't think it would be. I thought it was going to be something else.
Yeah. So as always, awesome vet scene. Then we cut back to Mesa Verde's gotten their stuff all taken care of. Kim continues to be off, and there's this very awkward exchange where Kim kind of, sort of tells them there's this thing going on, but minimizes her relationship with Jimmy in terms of, and I'm not saying, that she needed to kind of kick out that they were a couple, but there's this guy I share an office with, and there's this thing going on, and she kind of neglects to mention that she's co-counsel for this case.
True. Does she have to, though? This is where I think there's certain, obviously we are both podcast fans. I've been listening to a lot of crime-oriented podcasts, like true crime podcasts, and almost never, even though I'm sure that a lot of the people speaking have a great deal of knowledge about the topic they're speaking of, there's only one where they've actually brought on, that I've listened to, where they've actually brought in a legal expert to explain some of the legalities of things they're talking about. I almost feel like we should invite a lawyer on one of these episodes with us to kind of explain the legalities of that. And this is a situation where that would really help.
Yeah. And actually, I sadly enough, I'm embarrassed to say I have a few lawyer connects. So I might be able to pull that off. But yeah, I think it would be good. Now the key is going to be: do we have any of my lawyer friends, lowercase f? If I don't know if any of them watch Better Call Saul, so I'm gonna have to find that out. I think I got a fighting chance on one. But yeah, I totally think we need some legal advice. I mean, we need legal advice on a lot of things.
Right. It's going to be interesting to have them on to talk about Better Call Saul, but then we're asking them about our own personal issues.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's good. We'd like to move over to these issues as well.
So Kim and Jimmy would like to know that if I did this.
Yeah, let's say that this was... Yeah,
hypothetically, if Kelly was in the courtroom and he needed this.
All righty. So the owner, who's this combination of kind of a nice guy, but also somebody that is like really clear that you can get on the wrong side of quick. It's like, well, I don't like it when people cover up their mistakes. And I just wonder, I don't know if Kim's necessarily covering stuff up here, but it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because, as I mentioned in our last podcast, the writers do not waste a lot of energy on this show. Right. And so if we've got this exchange around the guy saying, I don't like people who don't cover up their own mistakes, and Kim's giving partial information, we're going to have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I feel like her half-truth admission is going to come back to haunt her.
Yeah, which makes me sad because the Kim character is awesome. The actress is awesome. I want nothing but good for her, but we'll have to see.
Without question, my favorite of the new characters that were introduced in this series.
It is. She's just amazing. I mean, it's just, one, she does so much without saying a word in so many scenes. It's a tremendously well-written character and a very interesting character, and then the execution of it's just, awesome.
I would watch a Kim show.
Yeah, I would too. She's really, I mean, she's likable, she's complex. I would absolutely watch a Kim show. Maybe Kim and Huel will. But the way things pan out, it looks like Huel lines up with Saul, so that's unfortunate. But
well, maybe if Kim is still around, which is something we'll touch on later, maybe if she's still around, they can do a sequel show to Breaking Bad, but it's like The Odd Couple, and Kim and Huel get like a place together.
Yeah, Kim buys the house that Huel was sitting in at the end of Breaking Bad. He's still sitting there, and so she's stuck with him. That would be good. The other thing that might be interesting is Kim becomes the lawyer for the vet.
That could be good too. Yeah,
that could be good too. That could be super fun. And then we get a little bit of the remaining of the scene of a court preview of they're coming in and they're saying we can turn all the lights off, but we can't turn the exit signs off due to code. And we start to see that Howard is trying to, maybe nuance Chuck out of testifying, mostly for PR for the company. And you start to see Howard start to have some doubts around is Chuck a liability or not. This is super interesting for me. Again, another actor who's knocking out of the park is Patrick Fabian as Howard.
Oh, absolutely,
and
yeah.
Chuck, but where do you land on Howard by the end of this? I mean, through this episode, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy?
So what I love about Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is that I feel like none of the reason the characters are so great and so complex is because none of them really fall entirely into the good or bad category, and the best characters, whether it's Jimmy and Howard, are really equal parts of that. Because Howard, I still think is a bad guy, but he's not the bad guy we thought he was when the series began.
Yeah,
he's more like a henchman following orders than the evil villain behind the scenes pulling the strings that we thought that we were led to believe in the beginning.
Yeah. I think at his core he's a pragmatic guy, and he's going to be willing to say there comes a point in time where I cut my losses.
Yes,
and he's going to be very business focused.
Yeah, and I think that this is the first time where we've seen him start to draw a line in the sand with Chuck, which is saying a lot considering where Chuck is in his life at this point.
Yep. Agreed.
Like, I think it can't be said that Howard hasn't been loyal to Chuck up until this point.
Yeah, and then we roll right into that next scene where, there's some very cool stuff of Jimmy and Kim preparing. The bar hearing starts. Howard testifies. And you can tell Jimmy's a little itchy because he's talking about flight delays and there's somebody they want and they have to stall. And then we cut over to Chuck rehearsing not being a douche. quite unsuccessfully, I'd like to point out.
Well, I love this scene because I'm sure anyone who is, ready to speak in court, any attorney who goes through this often probably prepares things they're going to say or comes up with a certain tone that they intend to use to get the point across that they want. But it's interesting that what he's rehearsing isn't a speech for a jury or evidence for this particular hearing, but he's actually rehearsing how not to sound like he hates his brother.
Yeah, which doesn't feel particularly authentic, to say the least.
And I think that scene shows so much about that character and where he's at mentally going into this.
Yeah, especially when the analog he wants to run through for the Jim and Chuck relationship is Ted Kaczynski. so that's a flag. That's a flag.
Yeah.
So they prep, they're getting ready, they're prepping the room for Chuck, and then we see what you figured out, what I didn't until this moment, was our good friend Huel, the awesome Huel, returns and bumps into Chuck, and we all know what happens when Huel bumps into somebody.
Absolutely. And I really didn't figure it out. As soon as they said that, I was like, I wonder if it's Huel. But then I thought, nah, that won't be the case. So I was pleasantly surprised still.
Yeah, it was awesome. It didn't feel forced. It made perfect sense.
And that's why I second guessed myself when I initially had that. And I was like, no, they're not going to try and shoehorn in another character. But when it actually came, it didn't feel that way. It was very subtle the way they worked him in.
And so we come back, and Chuck is now on the witness stand. He's explaining his illness to the bar lawyer. Chuck talks about the law being mankind's greatest achievement, and the only reason he's here is to defend it. Eventually, Rebecca rolls in the room, quite to Chuck's surprise, and he kind of requests a break. And Jimmy and Kim are over at the vending machine, and in a very telling kind of exchange, Kim goes, "She's going to hate you when this is over." And Jimmy goes, "Yep," and kind of moves on.
Which shows, in a subtle way, the way that he just accepts that and moves on. We're seeing, again, another small piece of the conscience layer of Jimmy falling away and letting Saul come forward.
Yeah, I think this becomes like one of the first. That is definitely a Saul Goodman answer versus a Jimmy McGill answer at this point in time. So
right, and especially because in the flashback you can tell that he is concerned about her being told the truth about Chuck's condition. When she leaves, he wants to take her back to her hotel or wherever she was going to go. So there is a level of care and concern for her in the flashback sequence that, not that he doesn't care about her now, but he has no problem using her to get at Chuck.
Yep. Yeah, and this is just another layer of the good Jimmy slowly fading away to get from the likable guy with a conscience to the still, to me, very likable guy with no conscience. It's all good.
The transition from likable with a conscience to likable without a conscience.
Yeah, there you go. So then we move to the money shot, the big finish here, where Jimmy asked Chuck to describe the room. He's trying to kind of set the scene around this is not normal. Chuck kind of goes, yeah, and you got Rebecca here and try to rattle me, and I'm too together for that. And there's this whole process of Jimmy's got a cell phone with him, but there's actually no battery in it. And then the big reveal was that Huel placed a battery in Chuck's breast pocket when he bumped into him. And this is where my quote comes from, which is not like a funny quote on its own, but in context of the show is hilarious, because Jimmy goes, And Huel Babineau, who's on the witness list, will testify that he planted that battery on you an hour and a half ago. And then Huel stands up and goes, hour and 43 minutes. And that's my quote of the day.
Which is a perfect quote. I was hoping when you said it was later in the episode that was actually it, because I laughed out loud at this moment. I thought it was great.
I did too, because it was so Huel. It was so awesome. And it was just great. It was great to hear. So, hour and 43 minutes is my quote of the. I think I do a pretty good Huel.
You do. It's not bad.
And then Chuck melts down. And
which we knew was coming, and that's what I had said in the beginning. Like, I knew where this episode was going to end, and even knowing that, still enjoyed the path that we took to get here.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was what we've been waiting for, which is we knew was going to come, and it was time for Jimmy to kind of outflank Chuck, and he was very successful in doing that. He didn't take glee in it, but he was driving it home, and it was good. So the fallout from this is going to be interesting. They ran, I had a chance to see some of the scenes from the upcoming one, and it's a little bit of Rebecca telling Jimmy, you got to make things right. You got what you wanted, now you got to make things right. Howard telling Chuck he's at a crossroads. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see. And this was an episode without Mike. So we had no Mike, and the upcoming previews did show. We're going to get a whole lot of the next set of developments with Mike and Nacho and the gang, which is good. That'll be very exciting as well.
Which is good. And I definitely missed seeing Mike in this, but last week's, the previous episode was definitely a very Mike-centric episode. Yep. So in a way, like, it's good they just got this whole hearing out of the way so that we can get, back to Mike where he's at without trying to shoehorn him in. And again, that goes back to, as we've both said many times, how well written this show is.
Yep.
They're pacing it out perfectly.
Yeah, I think so. We're at the halfway point. So it'll be, we're going to have to kind of see the fallout from this, the further developments with Mike, and then the other super cool thing, and they're very clever on their packaging of the upcoming stuff. You do get Kim saying Saul Goodman at the end of it, and it sounds like the delivery could be, we'll see, Jimmy saying, okay, crap, I've got to come up with another name. What other name could I use? And it's Kim offering up. So what we may find out, like many things, Ice Station Zebra, a lot of other things, is that Kim's fingerprints are on the Saul Goodman enterprise in a lot of different ways, that to the degree she may have been the one that pitched the name. We'll see. Yeah,
that will definitely be interesting to see. And one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is seeing the fallout, not just because, obviously we know that Jimmy, continues to practice law. So not really the fallout, what happens with that, but I want to see what happens with Hamlin and Chuck.
Yeah, I got to think there's going to be a cutting of ties there, but we'll see.
Yeah, because we already saw that he, was concerned about getting Chuck up there. And that was the first time that he kind of took a little bit of a stand against him. And now with Jimmy obviously coming out on top of this whole situation, where does that leave their firm?
Yep. Yeah, because Chuck was an integral part of some of their resources, but this whole performance during this bar hearing is not going to be, his brand is not on the upswing.
Right. This could tarnish the reputation of their entire firm. Yeah. So if Hamlin's going to put the business first, he has to sever ties with Chuck. But we know that he does have strong loyalties to Chuck. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Agreed. Yeah,
do you think that in severing ties, Hamlin will try and repair his relationship a little bit with Jimmy?
I don't. I think he's I think he respects Jimmy for his energy and his hustle, but he also knows that Jimmy is a fast and loose kind of guy, and Hamlin is not. as evidenced by how he ran to get into the back of Chuck's house. You know, he's a little more structured.
Right.
So I do think maybe at least at a relationship level that he may let Jimmy know that there's a level of respect, but that's about the extent of it. I don't think that there's any other, and particularly once Jimmy goes full Saul, Hamlin won't come anywhere close to that.
Yeah, I definitely think Hamlin is going to be done with the McGill brothers after this.
I think there's a very, very good chance that that's the case.
I hope we continue to see the character, though, in the remainder of this series.
Yeah, again, they've done a fantastic job of introducing, pulling forward some old characters in very cool ways, and then the new characters they've introduced, the vet, Howard, Kim. I mean, these are all home runs. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, so now we need to come to our meters. And again, this is where Kelly goes, one of these days I'm going to get something together, but I don't have anything together yet. I'm going to have to go back and listen to all of our previous podcasts to get our numbers. But we are keeping track on a weekly basis at this point now 2 data points. A Kim-o-meter, which is our sense of how likely it is Kim's going to meet a dire end on a scale of 1 to 100, with 100 being the direst of men and 0 being super awesome. And then we also created the Lyle-nometer. We didn't see Lyle this episode.
No.
We had Lyle pretty high. I don't think that's going to change. But so the Kim-o-meter, we were still sitting around the high 50s. This particular episode, did you see any creation of movement there?
Just slightly. So I feel like there's 2 major turning points that we're going to see turn Jimmy into Saul. The first one being his final separation from Chuck, which is obviously what's happening now. And then to me, the final push into being Saul is going to be whatever happens to Kim. So I think the first one is down. So it's sort of like, the halfway mark of the race. Not only that, but as you pointed out before, her client saying about, covering things up when she was a little bit dishonest, they don't waste a lot of time with the writing in this, as we've discussed a few times. So I think that's going to come back into play.
I think so. So where do you got the Kim-o-meter?
It's hard. She's definitely like 62, I want to say.
I can live with that. It could, mostly because eventually when I create this graphic, I don't want to create like multiple data points. So we'll need to come to agreement. I'm willing to reach consensus on 62. And I think we had Lyle around 90. I have to go back and listen. But I still think he's still sitting there.
Yeah, in fact, well, based on what we know is coming next week and it being more of a Mike-centric episode and going back into that storyline, I think the next time we see Lyle, well, let's just say I don't think we're going to see Lyle many more times. So the next time we see Lyle could be the last time we see Lyle.
That could be. So do we want to bubble? I think we had Lyle at 90. Like I said, I'll have to go back and check. But so are we moving him up to 95?
I think that's fair.
Okay. We can do that. So we got Kim at 62, Lyle at 95 on our impending doom meters. We got our quotes. We had a successful 30-second recap and another awesome episode of Better Call Saul. So I don't have anything to add for the rest of the show. Do you, Mike?
No, nothing to add.
Great. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Key, you need to kind of name Jimmy's goldfish. That's going to be important.
Absolutely.
So except for our one YouTube commenter, who he's more of a squat cobbler commenter, so maybe he doesn't make his way over here. We would love to hear goldfish names, though. So please offer up some there. That'd be super awesome. And with that, I'm going to say, hey, thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Keep those dicks swinging.